Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this lesson here is going to be about Module 23, Section 2. This is the Columbian Exchange. You watched a Hip Hughes video about this last week, and you should have read the textbook and filled out some questions. You should have turned that assignment in today, either on paper, put that on the desk, turn it into the substitute, or turn it into Schoology under the Module 23, Section 2 assessment link. This here is going to be the presentation that I would have done last week with the students when I was here on Friday. I'll do this here on a video. Now, I've got a document that the substitute's going to pass out to you. It's this document right here, Module 23, Section 2, Columbian Exchange. I want you filling this out as we go through this. The first thing I want you to do is, in your own words, I want you to write out in a sentence or two, what was the Columbian Exchange to you? What is it to you after doing the reading, after listening to Hip Hughes? So you can pause the video now and you can go ahead and write down your answer to that. And then when you're done, go ahead and start the video back up again and we'll start talking about some of these things right here on the Columbian Exchange. Okay, so maybe take a couple minutes to fill out that question number one. Okay, so after you've done this Columbian Exchange, what I want to do is I just want to kind of hit these main points right here about the plants that were brought around on the Columbian Exchange between the Old World and the New World, the animals, the disease, and ideas and technology. We'll try to hit on some of those. And then we might even get to doing what was the impact. Now, 2 and 3, this is really going to be you guys after I've gone through this presentation right here, in your own words, putting down the opinion here as to what was the impact of the Columbian Exchange on the Old World, what was the impact of the Columbian Exchange on the New World. And then there is a final question here dealing with the text, why were Africans chosen to be slaves in the Americas? Can't guarantee I'm going to get to all of that in this video here. We'll see what we can get in about the next 15 minutes on the video and stuff like that. For this part right here, I'm not asking you to write sentences or anything like that. Really for this here, plants, animals, disease, and all that, you can list some of the plants, but more importantly, I want you listing down some positives and negatives with different types of plants that were brought around on the Columbian Exchange. Okay, so let's get some definitions out of the way first of all. Exchange. What is an exchange? An exchange is really just trade or swapping, those types of things. We still use the word exchange today. There's the New York Stock Exchange. The New York Stock Exchange is a place where you can give money and they will give you stock certificates. It's basically like taking ownership of, ownership in a company. So that's the stock exchange. You may have heard of some of them known as the Dow Jones Industrial or the NASDAQ, the S&P 500. But that's what an exchange is. Exchange is also every time I go into the gas station to get my Diet Mountain Dew, I'm exchanging money for the Diet Mountain Dew. So really, it's just trade. And that's what the Columbian Exchange. And yes, it was named, I guess you could say, after Christopher Columbus. But according to that Hip Hughes video, we should know by now that the Columbian Exchange, that term, didn't really come around until like the 1970s when a historian wrote a book about all these different items and goods that were exchanged between the Old World, which that's another definition we need to get out. The Old World is basically Europe, Asia, and Africa, and the New World, which is the Americas. This whole new group of lands that were rediscovered, I guess you could say, when Columbus came over, and then all the other explorers came over after him. Okay, so that's what the exchange and why it's called the Columbian Exchange. So while they were doing all this trading back in the 1500s, 1600s, they weren't sitting there going, oh, great, I'm trading on the Columbian Exchange. No, it was just trade to them. We term it the Columbian Exchange today. All right, some of the plants. I'm going to kind of show the textbook here. We've got the Columbian Exchange right here. You've got a good visual. This was in the textbook reading. You can see all these different plants and some animals and things like that that were exchanged between these two worlds. Okay, the Old World over here, as you can see, these different items are going to be traded over here and brought over to the Americas. All of this, not just the United States, we're talking the Americas. And really, for the first 100 years or so, it's really South America that is dealing with this Columbian exchange. And then over here in the New World, you can see all these items that are going to be brought over to Europe and Africa and eventually Asia. And also, so that's part of the Columbian exchange. Now, there are going to be hundreds and hundreds of other items that are along this Columbian exchange that we just can't put every item into a textbook or into some kind of a nice little package that we could talk about everything. You could certainly research more things like that. But some of these plants, they're going to come from the old world, like grapes and bananas and sugarcane, especially wheat, those types of things that come over here. And then eventually the things that are here in the new world that come over to the old world. Some of the bigger items like potatoes, over here to Ireland. My family is from Ireland, and it was baffling to me when I first learned about this Columbian exchange that potatoes were first in the Americas. The Native Americans actually planted potatoes, and then it comes over to Ireland. And by the 1800s, potatoes in Ireland, that's all they really have. That's their staple crop. They do everything with potatoes. And it's the reason why so many Irish came to the United States in the mid 1800s, because the potato crop failed for about a decade, and so many people died and suffered. So families came over to the United States. Another big crop that was right here, or plant that was right here in the Americas, all around this area, was tobacco. I know the Hip Hughes video talked a lot about how tobacco is going to be exported or traded over to Europe and Africa and Asia. And that's one crop that, really comes from the New World and goes to the Old World and could cause some devastation and things like that. But in the beginning, tobacco was a cash crop. It was really how Jamestown becomes successful, was with the tobacco crop. Jamestown would have probably gone away in the early 1600s if it wasn't for the tobacco crop and how they were able to take tobacco and use that as trade for wealth. Because you're not eating tobacco, things like that. So, you're smoking it. So it has no, food value or anything like that, like these other plants are. Okay. So those are some things. Now, positives and negatives. Okay. Positives of plants coming to the New World or going from the New World to the Old World. One of the positives is that you have a varied or a diverse diet. Okay, with being able to eat different foods, you're going to be healthier. It doesn't mean you're going to live longer or things like that, but your life is going to be healthier. Just like today, if you will vary your diet with fruits and vegetables, along with the meats and other things, or the grains, that's a good thing. You are going to be healthier. So that is a bonus. It's a positive, definitely a positive. Some other positives we talked about last week in class were medicinal purposes. Some of these plants that will go between the two worlds can be used for medicines to cure illnesses or to heal, things like that. So that's a good thing. And then another final positive we talked about was kind of wealth. A lot of these plants, even still today, will be used as cash crops, and people can become wealthy off of these things. I mean, right here, corn. Just the corn itself. Think about Nebraska and how much corn we grow around here in the heartland, and really just fields just outside our school. Some of that corn may end up in China or Africa or Russia, something like that, because we trade corn all around the world. So that's a bonus. That's definitely a positive. Now, a negative I could see on some of this type of stuff is that, with sugarcane. Look at the sugarcane comes from the old world over to the new world, especially here to the Caribbean. Well, with that sugarcane, it's a very, very labor intensive crop. This is where you have your first plantations. And of course, then on the plantations, that's synonymous with slavery. Okay, you need such a huge labor force if you want to become wealthy off this sugarcane. Well, that's going to lead to eventually slaves being introduced to the Americas by the Europeans and Asians and Africans and things like that, specifically here in this area. And then, of course, eventually it will come up here into what is known as the United States today. So that I definitely would say is a negative. Some other negatives with plants is that, like tobacco, for instance, you plant tobacco on the same field for, let's say, 3-4 years in a row. Well, that's going to damage the soil of that land. And eventually what you'd have to do is leave that field basically alone for like 10 years. That means you couldn't plant anything there because it just so devastated the soil structure, the nutrients and things like that. what that's going to lead to then is, okay, if I'm a tobacco farmer, well, this year I can't plant on this field, or I can't plant on this field for the next 10 years, but I need more fields then because I don't want to lose my wealth and things like that. So that leads to a lot of taking land from others, especially at that time, taking land from the Native Americans. And that's going to lead to a lot of negatives of driving Native Americans off of lands, especially here in the United States, pushing them further and further west because tobacco plantations and eventually cotton plantations are just going to want more and more land to get more and more wealthy. So I could see that as a negative also. All right, let's go to the animals real quickly. As you can see, some of the animals that are listed here: cattle, chickens, horses, pigs, how they're going to be brought from the old world to the new world. And really, all like they show on this map is like turkeys coming from the new world to the old world. Little side note, fun fact: Benjamin Franklin wanted the turkey to be the national bird when they were thinking of a national bird when their country was formed. Not the American eagle, but the turkey. But that's a little fun fact. But anyways, what happened positively with all this exchange of animals and things like that, especially from the old world to the new world, is introducing new labor sources, transportation sources, things like that. Horses can be used for transportation over here in the new world now, transporting individuals themselves or hooking up a wagon, and you can haul goods with the horses or haul people. Specifically, what they'll do, especially here in South America, is they'll use horses to haul silver out of the silver mines and things like that here in South America, especially the Spanish. But then the other thing, of course, is food. It's a food source. Cattle with the milk, and then eventually the beef. I know there was a talk in this book about, like hamburger sandwiches and things like that we have at our fast food restaurants. Wouldn't be here without the cattle. Okay, a lot of those things wouldn't be here. Pigs, of course, for the pork products, all that type of stuff. So once again, the varied, diverse diet. But of course, transportation is huge. You can use those horses for transportation. You can use, they don't have it on here, but oxen. You can use oxen for a labor source to pull the equipment in the fields for planting and harvesting and all that type of stuff. So they can be used as an energy labor force. Good things like that. Some negatives, I'm just trying to think. The negatives, maybe you can find some negative to where, these animals being introduced over here to the New World, a lot of these animals might have carried diseases that the New World had not been exposed to. So that kind of just goes right into our disease part too, where, that it doesn't show it on this map here, but diseases are going to be taken from the old world, especially to the new world, specifically like measles and smallpox, smallpox being the worst. Smallpox is really going to be the one that devastates the Native American population. So definitely a negative with the diseases and how it almost just wipes out the Native American population. So that's really the negative, is all the death and destruction that's going to happen with the diseases. A positive I could see, or we kind of talked about, was it will build the immune system for those that survive. Maybe you find new medical treatments, things like that. I suppose you could say would be a positive with that there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop it at that point there because I want to make sure I don't go too far over 15 minutes and things like that. We'll deal with ideas and technology maybe later. On your own, you can certainly, fill in this part here about the impact of the Columbian Exchange on the Old World, which is Europe, and then what was the impact on the New World. One of the impacts on the Old World, of course, is it's going to make these countries that first come over here so much more wealthy. And then what it leads to is these countries fighting each other for power over here in the New World. What's a big impact on the climate exchange of the New World? Well, just think about all the introduction of plants and animals, but think about slavery. Think about the Native American population with diseases and things like that. You can find this one here towards the end of the text, why were Africans chosen to be slaves in the Americas? Think about the first people that were thought to be slaves, the Native Americans, and why it will quickly change from Native Americans to Africans instead. All right, if you have any questions or things like that, please email me. Be good. The next thing you should be working on after this is your explorers, and I'll have another video to explain that. Have a great day.